Hi, my name is Priya Roy, and I'm a cloud economist at AWS. Today, I will provide a brief overview on how to conceptualize the business value of cloud migration and modernization. Then I will introduce our panelists who will use real-world examples to discuss how you can transform your business through modernization. To discuss modernization, we must first talk about how to conceptualize the value of being in the cloud in the first place. When thinking of the cloud, many companies focus on cost savings, with IDC research from 2022 showing the average 5-year return on investment from cloud migration being over 400%, and the average payback period being only 10 months. However, the value drivers outside of costs account for more than 90% of the value your business can achieve. To consolidate thinking about the business value of cloud, AWS has developed a 5-pillar approach called the Cloud Value Framework. This framework is designed to help organizations think through the diverse ways they can realize value on the cloud. The first pillar is cost savings. This is specifically in regard to infrastructure cost savings. On-premises, companies have to forecast into the future and provision for capacity they think they might need over that period, leading to inefficient expenditure. Moreover, organizations have to pay for cooling, power, and security on top of that expensive hardware. Meanwhile, on the cloud, an organization need only pay for what it is actually using and need not over-provision or pay for the physical maintenance of the infrastructure. As a result, organizations can realize significant savings. The second pillar is staff productivity, which considers how an organization's staff might become more efficient by operating on the cloud versus on-premises. Given that on the cloud, each admin can manage more virtual machines or more storage terabytes with the same amount of time, each worker becomes more productive and has more time to work on innovative, experimental, and value-driving tasks. The third pillar is operational resilience. By being on the cloud versus on-premises, organizations realize significant value through improved security, less unplanned downtime, fewer outages, and other operational benefits. The fourth pillar is business agility. On the cloud, features can get to market more quickly, more processes can be automated, fewer errors are made, and user satisfaction improves. All of these work together to mean a business can be more agile and innovative in the cloud. Finally, the fifth pillar of cloud value is sustainability. Many organizations are seeking to reduce the environmental impact of their operations, and because they no longer need to maintain a high-usage physical environment and can instead leverage AWS's highly efficient data centers, organizations can see a material reduction in carbon emissions. Moreover, Amazon aims to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2040. Which means that organizations running on AWS can be confident their IT infrastructure is environmentally conscious. When taking these 5 pillars together, you can see that there are numerous areas of value on the cloud. But these benefits extend beyond simply migrating to cloud and can be significantly enhanced through modernization on the cloud. For some organizations, modernization is a one-step approach, going straight from a legacy on-premises environment to a modernized end state. For others, it's a 2-step journey, beginning first with migration and then embarking on modernization. According to research from Known in 2022, if we look across each of our Cloud Value Framework pillars, we can see that modernization leads to immense value creation, all on top of value already realized from migrating to the cloud. Through modernizing, organizations have realized a further 39% reduction in IT infrastructure spend and have seen an extra 80% increase in virtual machines managed per admin. Moreover, modernization can lead to a further 13% reduction in time to resolve security incidents and an extra 20% reduction in time to deploy features. And when it comes to sustainability, modernized organizations can realize 60% less energy consumption for the same performance. How is modernization able to accelerate so much extra value to organizations? By taking advantage of the latest cloud technologies. But what exactly is modernization? I'll give you a way of thinking about it now, and we'll discuss it further in our panel. While modernization can be a lot of things, A simple definition considers the pathways that an organization embarks upon to transform from their legacy technology landscape into modern applications in order to unlock more business value. With this definition in mind, there are 4 main categories of modern apps: containers, serverless, managed data, and managed analytics. Containers are a standard way to package an application's code, configurations, and dependencies into a single object. The benefit of this is that organizations can transform their cloud infrastructure into modular applications built in a standardized manner. This leads to far greater portability and flexibility in the infrastructure, enabling organizations to reduce the amount of time staff need to spend on configuration, allowing them to work on more strategic, transformative work. And linking this to our cloud value framework, you can see that containers mainly drive value in the operational resilience and business agility pillars, but with clear benefits in staff productivity as well. Serverless is a way to build and run applications and services without managing servers, removing the costs of acquisition and maintenance of those servers. Serverless also allows for more rapid feature or build deployment by taking provisioning out of the process. This modernization pathway allows for organizations to convert monolithic applications to cloud native more quickly, since they no longer need to worry about server provisioning. Saving this step delivers the additional benefit of reducing IT infrastructure spend by increasing compute efficiency and compute utilization ratios. In linking this to our cloud value framework, you can see that serverless primarily drives infrastructure cost savings and staff productivity benefits. Managed data is a fully managed, purpose-built database service, supporting diverse data models and applications. As organizations today sit on more data than they can actually utilize, managed data allows for employees to shift from manual data cleaning and processing to more strategic analysis that drives the business. This enables organizations to uncover insights at a much quicker pace and use more of their data to inform these insights. Managed data also empowers organizations to develop applications in a cloud-native framework. When considering how this relates to our cloud value framework, we can see that it's the business agility pillar that's most improved by managed data. But like serverless, these efficiencies lead to less overall IT infrastructure spend by way of more efficient compute and data storage. Managed analytics is a range of services supporting analytics use cases like data lake initiatives, big data processing, real-time analytics, and operational analytics. It enables quicker time to insight, as well as the ability to utilize more data for insights. It also drives staff to develop cloud-first applications. The speed at which managed analytics can deliver new insights in turn decreases the amount of time needed to resolve security incidents. These efficiencies also lead to lower overall IT infrastructure spend, similar to managed data, but we can also see that the pillar of the cloud value framework most benefited by managed analytics is business agility. While I've highlighted the primary pillars of the cloud value framework impacted by each of these categories, it's important to note that highly modernized organizations realize benefits across all pillars. Now that you've had an overview of modernization and how it could transform your business, let's speak to our panelists to get their hands-on insights on how you could achieve this yourself. Today, I will be joined by Yuan-Je Lin and Paul Stafford to talk about modernization, what it is and how it can unlock value in your business. Yuan is a partner in the cloud and engineering team at Deloitte, and Paul is the lead for our serverless team at AWS in Australia and New Zealand. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So now that you've heard the modernization pathways that I was speaking about just now, I would like to start off our panel by just getting a sense for what do you think of modernization? What does it mean to you? Yuan, let's start with you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Priya. And I think based on my experience and sort of looking around the industry and working with different clients, we're really seeing that modernization is becoming a very strong trend, right? It's very much a paradigm shift away from the traditional migration, where migration is very much about infrastructure problems, but modernization, very much to your sort of point around the cloud value framework, is about business value. Now, early this year, I actually co-authored with one of my fellow partners, Brian Ross, a paper called Migration to Modernization, How to Unlock Greater Business Value from the Cloud. Now, in this paper, we actually took a view that application modernization can help businesses reimagine and re-architect not only IT functions, but also their business functions to better benefit the business. And it's our belief that by taking an accelerated, efficient, and holistic approach, right, to modernization, and that is how you can better evolve your legacy applications, as well as garner value out of the existing systems and start to use new technologies that would drive innovation and growth. Our paper very much focuses on the why and how of modernization towards a target state of modern apps.
Great, thank you, Ewan. And Paul, from your perspective, what would you describe as modernization?
When we talk about modern applications, and specifically what constitutes a modern application, it's useful to talk in terms of key common characteristics. And we've learned that primarily there are 5 key common characteristics that constitute a modern application. And this is based on the experience we have working with a lot of our customers globally. Firstly, architectural patterns should be as modular as possible. And this brings the concept of microservices into the idea of the modern application and what it is that you're building. Secondly, your operational model should have a serverless bias, which you talked a bit about in terms of its abstraction of infrastructure. Thirdly, software delivery, which is vitally important, needs to be automated, needs to be abstracted, and needs to be standardized. Management and governance is really all about the idea of bringing in those frameworks and those best practices that everybody should be participant to. And lastly, data management should be decoupled and it should be built for purpose. If there was a secret formula that organizations are using to extract the most benefit out of their modern applications, we find it is usually comprised of these 5 characteristics.
Thanks, Paul. That's really helpful. I think when we talk about modernization, I just want to be clear about when we say modernization versus modern apps. I think you were mentioning that modernization is a journey that seeks a target end state of modern apps.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, I think if we take the very simplified definition that modernization is very much a pathway and the journey towards the modern apps, then we can really break it down to, well, with modernization, we've got to start with the why, think about the how, and the what is actually the target state of serverless containers, modern analytics, and managed databases. So our paper very much wanted to help our clients and decision makers to really focus in on the why. Because between myself and my co-author, we had a lot of conversations around modernization, but the need to actually discuss, well, why do we need to modernize, or why do we need to further optimize the existing technology landscape? And the answer became very much around the reason why is actually to focus on what we call above the line benefits. Because traditional migrations, as they were very much infrastructure driven and bottom up, tend to focus on what we call below the line. And hence, we really wanted our paper to emphasize to our clients the need to focus on above the line benefits, such as how to benefit your business, how to benefit your customer, your employees, so that they can actually, the decision makers themselves can actually start the modernization journey with the right perspective in mind.
And in your paper, this is the 11 key drivers that you mentioned?
That's right. So if we sort of think about the above the line benefits, in terms of customer benefit, how can we create better functionality for our customers? How can we improve our product that is more tailored to the customer experience? If we think about employees, you mentioned staff productivity, that is very important, but also staff retention and acquisition, the employee value proposition. We are very much in an age where not only the organization needs to strive to be born in the cloud, the employees themselves are born in the cloud. How do we attract graduates and talent pool that expect to be working with modern apps from day one, right? They do not come to an organization expecting to working with legacy systems. So modernization definitely drive a long way in terms of employee productivity and value proposition. lastly, agility in terms of business value. How do we measure business value? The easiest way is to actually measure business value purely by speed to market and agility. By having a modern technology landscape, an organization is able to experiment safely within security guardrails some of the latest technologies such as generative AI, Web3, tokenization, and that way it allows the organization to really look at some of these cutting edge technologies while remaining compliant and also seeking to build up a competitive edge. So all in all, there is 11 key drivers that we find. It aligns very well to the AWS Cloud Value Framework. And all together, they will help to benefit the organization in terms of the business, the employees, and also the end customer.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Ewan. And Paul, from your experience and conversations, what are you seeing as driving the interest in modernization?
Over the last 2 years, our customers have told us that their primary drivers have come from two main areas. Firstly, their customers and their users, and in some situations, their customers' customers, are evolving. And by that I mean they're generationally evolving. They expect a holistic and integrated view of their needs and their relationships. That's, I suppose, a bar for entry. They expect a lot more than that, but at the very least, it needs to be integrated. Secondly, the markets these days are unpredictable, and organizations and their systems are expected to scale, to handle that volatility, to meet customer and market needs, and that includes delivering change topics like creating net new capabilities rapidly to partner effectively or compete effectively, or in some situations even create entirely new paths to revenue. So for many of our customers, an initial step towards modernization is about alleviating those pressures through outcomes such as speed and agility and reduced risk and operational efficiencies and cost value control. The economic impact of the global pandemic and post, especially post, has had a vastly different impact to that of, say, the GFC, in that it has accelerated a burgeoning business focus or mindset that we've started calling build resilience, disrupt, and avoid disruption, in that order, in that sequence. This was recently evidenced by IDC in a study of the sentiment of business leaders globally. And they released this in a document which was called The Future of Digital Innovation, which basically covers concepts like current market conditions and their resulting IT implications. They found that globally, the world is going to create 750 million net new cloud-native applications between 2020 and the end of 2025, which is more than all the previous 40 years of application development all added together. Now, this is an astounding number, and a logical question at this point would be, why? What's driving this behavior? The answer to this is build resilience, disrupt, and avoid disruption is becoming a common viewpoint amongst our customers. In their study, IDC found that this is manifesting in two very important ways. Firstly, by the end of 2022, so last year, 30% of spending on IT and business services will be driven by the need to strengthen digital resilience and adapt more readily to future business disruptions. And secondly, by 2022, 55% of organizations that have expanded resiliency plans to future-proof their business, improving profitability, innovation rate, and efficiencies, will achieve a 20% up on their peers who don't. Now, that's a whole bunch of words, but basically what it means is the benefit of modern applications and how it helps these organizations disrupt and avoid disruption is becoming well understood.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Paul. And, when you think about all of these drivers taking place and all of this interest in modernization, is there a new norm? What is it? What are sort of changed priorities for business?
Perhaps unsurprisingly, it starts with the control of resilience and security. And then, excitingly, it becomes all about business progression and productivity. What you're looking at here is a snapshot of the current day business mindset of leaders globally. 75% are reviewing cost, indicating a focus on value and control. 77% are also improving business agility, which is indicating a focus on speed and agility. 78% are also improving resilience, indicating a focus on focus and efficiency. And 63% and 50% are all about acquiring and retaining customers, new channels to market, new channels to revenue, which again indicates a focus on speed and agility. And this is where modern applications can directly aid and assist that new norm, that new focus. It's through levers such as speed to innovation, agility to change, risk control, gains in efficiency, and cost value control. And these days, these levers are squarely in the hands of technical and development teams within organizations.
Great, thanks, Paul. So far we've talked about what modernization is and how it can help businesses unlock new value. But one thing we haven't spoken about yet is how. Ewan, let's start with you. When thinking about, the experience that you've had with some of your customers, how are you seeing them going on these modernization journeys and unlocking that value?
Yeah, I think the benefit and the beauty of the work I do is that I do get exposure to a broad spectrum of industries and sectors. And we have, as a result of the work we've done, mapped out what we call a modernization capability model that really maps out the journey of an organization, first of all, dabbling, sort of exploring the cloud, becoming migrating into the cloud and truly being cloud native. And we'll come back to that in a moment. But I really wanted to draw out some of the really exemplary modernization use cases that I see in the market today. These use cases really highlight a lot of the benefit that we talked about. So if we think about a lot of the financial sector, right, in order to better serve their customers, be able to innovate with agility, they are looking at what's called core modernization, either modernization of core systems such as core banking or core insurance, typically very much hindered by legacy systems written in legacy languages with the aging workforce. This core modernization approach not only facilitates for innovation and agility, but it also de-risks that legacy as well as the aging workforce. What we see in the retail space, and this is something that we work closely with AWS on, is, for example, office work coming together with Canva to be able to create the create, print, and collect service. Right, that was actually a two-step modernization process where, first of all, they built out the necessary platform engineering capabilities that's needed, and then they collaborated with Canva in order to provide a delightful service to their customers. So not only the technology is modernized, the customer value chain and the customer experience has also been modernized. In the government space, especially with the recent pandemic, we do see a lot of innovation and modernization in the health sector, in the digital health sector, around digital health interoperability, using modern standards such as FHIR protocols that is RESTful and secure, as well as some of the more innovative ideas such as around transportation, air traffic, and rail, using digital twins and smart technologies to not only get a better sense of what is happening around the traffic landscape, but also to get a better ability to see predictions and simulation to make optimized decisions for the future. So these are the sort of examples of how organizations as well as government are moving into a modern state, and in order to benefit Australian citizens or their own customers.
Yeah, that's really great. And from that kind of broad range of experience that you've got, what kinds of challenges are you seeing?
Yeah, so the modernization journey typically is very different to the migration journey. The migration journey, as we already mentioned, typically are driven by total cost of ownership, risk and compliance, data center exit, once again, infrastructure problems. But when it comes to modernization, it's a completely different set of challenges and different conversations. Well, let's start with the why, right? We talked a lot about why we need to modernize. The typical conversation we actually do hear a lot is why should we modernize after we actually migrated, right? So that very much stems from the original intent of the migration was very infrastructure focused, and to take that next step in a two-step journey, the next step becomes a very much articulation of what the business value is. And it becomes a conversation around how to quantify some of the above-the-line benefits, such as that we talked about, the cloud value pillars, the employee value proposition, the customer experience, the more innovation and agility. And the conversation very much about quantifying those above-line risks, above-the-line benefit, which are typically not as easily quantifiable. Once the why question is tackled, it becomes a matter of, okay, I get that we need to modernize, but where should we start, right? We have so much technology landscape. They might all already be in the cloud, right? Or they might be on-prem, but with such a vast landscape, surely you're not telling me that I have to refactor everything. And that is absolutely the case. You actually don't necessarily have to refactor everything. As we mentioned, there are multiple different pathways to modernization. There are replatform strategy, there are refactor, re-architect, and there's also the option of simply retaining or retiring. And we'll touch on that in a bit more detail. Now, when we sort of think about, now that we've sort of tackled the why and the where, how do we start? When we think about a lot of the legacy systems, especially the core systems, they are written in very old languages and such as mainframes, right? Languages such as COBOL, and it becomes a very challenge of how do we even break apart a monolith when we don't even know the business rules of the monolith. And a lot of these systems were written in the 60s, the 70s, when there was completely a different programming paradigm. There were no interfaces, there was no APIs. Everything was driven by batch jobs and file-based systems. And that is actually the challenge of, okay, we understand the why, we understand where we should start. We should start with the core system, but we don't have the business rules. And it becomes a matter of really diving deep with specialized tooling around data mining, business rules discovery, database cutting, to be able to actually find out the rules in order to make an informed decision for how to modernize the next step for old legacy systems such as mainframes. Now, everything we talked about around the business of why, where we start, and how we deal with the technology, don't forget the who, right? The people and process are equally important as the business case as well as the technology. When we modernize technology, it's not just about technology, about the people who use them. Modern DevOps, serverless, observability, all the new modern paradigms has to be educated, has to be trained for the people to actually use them correctly and become effective in such technologies. A lot of especially the work we do around in the government space when it comes to really cutting edge technology such as digital twin, is a massive change management exercise as well, because a lot of the processes and decisions were actually made in a manual fashion before. So there wasn't a legacy system that we migrated or modernized into a new world. It's straight from manual processes into a modern real-time digital twin technology. And that actually requires a lot of change, a lot of working together collaboratively and modernizing the team that will be using the system, as well as building the system itself, for example. So when we think about sort of how we modernize, we got to start with the why, figure out where we go, right? How are we going to deal with the complexities and the legacy? And lastly, who are our audience when it comes to the end user? And together, that is how we need to treat a modernization journey.
Oh, wow. It sounds like there are some really good ways of thinking about and trying to plan a modernization journey. Thank you for that, Ewan. It's really helpful. Paul, if you're thinking about, trying to take it a step further into the specific use cases for modern apps, what are you seeing in this space?
Contemporary modern applications and modern application architectures actually offer a tremendous amount of flexibility with regards to the number of use cases they can support. And as a matter of fact, these days, there really isn't much that they can't support. Historically, we found that many organizations started their modern application journeys with the idea of automating things like batch jobs, for example, like Ewan was talking about earlier, or picking up common IT-related activities and automating them. So, validating configuration each time an EC2 instance is launched, or implementing some kind of schedule-based tasks as individual functions. From there, people started looking at where else can these architectural standards, where else can these paradigms be applied? And that kind of made a bit of a natural evolution into the idea of data processing applications and dynamic data pipelines, for which serverless is a very natural fit, which comes back to what you were talking about, Priya, at the start of our discussion around the idea of managed analytics and managed data. And this cross-domain activity is really where things have started becoming quite exciting. Now, as organizations then started to spread, the natural evolution, or the natural point that companies moved to, was the idea of web applications, mobile applications, front end and back end. How can we start looking at this in a far more triggered state? How can we start looking at utilizing triggered elements of modern applications for things like machine learning inferencing, which is, I suppose, the definition of something that can be sporadically used and then sporadically not used, depending on when it is that you need to actually inference the data and the models that you've got. One of the most exciting things that I've seen, and we're seeing more and more of this over the last couple of years, is the inclusion of event-driven architectures as a software architecture paradigm into modern applications. And event-driven architectures, or EDA, is really exciting because it's the idea of saying, how do we bring the concept of event producers, event consumers, and event detectors into our architecture, and then compute just what's needed based on the event that is actually created.
Okay, great. Thanks, Paul. So it sounds like there are a lot of really specific use cases, but also just across a wide range. If we try to take it, sort of abstract it to the organizational level. So we've talked about people and processes, we've talked about the technology, the use cases. At the organizational level, what does a modernized organization look like? Ewan?
Yeah, so sort of kind of just carry on from what Paul was saying around the target state we're all trying to get to is these modern applications. But as we have discovered in our discussion, is that everything has to come together. And this is where we mapped out the organization's modernization journey using our modernization capability model. What we found is that the typical organization would stop, right, their migration journey at what we would call the automated and optimized phase, right? So they will start to look at the cloud becoming more optimized, using sort of various FinOps techniques and to optimize the existing VMs, etc. But sort of to truly be in the cloud, that requires a shift in mindset, right? And it needs to, for organization, needs to really leverage the broader benefit of the cloud. With our capability model, if you look at going from the traditional infra worlds towards a data center in the cloud mindset, which is that sort of automate and optimize phase, becoming truly cloud native and being in the cloud, which is the far right-hand side, is actually shifting very much away from the infrastructure problems towards business problems, customer problems, socioeconomic sustainability issues, right? So whereas very much on the left-hand side, the traditional migration is focusing on increased automation, right? Better OpEx, the shift from CapEx towards OpEx, right? Being in the cloud, slowly moving towards modern apps, democratizing data, democratizing AI, unlocking better FinOps, real-time billing, per second billing, and tapping into innovations and experiments, and thinking about the socioeconomic benefits of ESGs and sustainability. So a real sort of born in the cloud posture for a modern organization also entails lightweight security, a shift left security, where the organization can innovate at speed whilst remaining compliant and also be socially responsible in terms of sustainability and to the environment. So a truly modernized organization in the cloud will benefit all aspects of the business, right? Not just in the technology.
Yeah. And I love how it also extends beyond the organization as well, with the social and the ESG kind of benefits as well that you were mentioning. So if an organization is trying to take their first steps down this path, Paul, what tips would you give them?
Outside of knowing the use cases, which we've already talked a little bit about, a great place to start with is with the idea of conceptualized modern application paths. And that usually helps with the initial idea of what to prioritize. To a large degree, this is dependent on where you're coming from. Do you have an existing application that you want to move, or are you building an application from scratch? So modernization paths are a great and simpler template to use for that initial how do we get the ball rolling concept. So as we mentioned, I think at the start of our talk, we recommend that when customers are building new applications, that they head down the serverless path, and that they usually couple that together with something like event-driven architectures. If you're already managing a portfolio of applications and you're looking to bring that into a cloud, then you have an opportunity to do so by using containers, and that tips directly and heavily into the idea of replatforming your applications. And that's the idea of cluster migration, containerization of the applications that you already have. Next up, we have refactoring, which is the idea of taking applications that exist and breaking them down to their function level and then building them or re-architecting them in as cloud native a fashion as possible. Refactoring usually takes the longest amount of time, but can yield very high results and very high value to the organization as a result. And then lastly, one of the things that Ewan talked a little bit about earlier is the idea of retiring unused applications, which is fantastic from a technical debt perspective, but also encourages organizations to simplify their business process, that the applications support the business logic that the applications support as part of the idea of moving to whatever that new norm might be.
Great, thank you, Paul. That's really helpful in understanding the modernization paths and what to prioritize, and kind of building on those paths, Ewan. You've created a modernization index as a starting point for organizations. Can you please talk us through that?
Yeah, it's very much taking what Paul has kind of walked us through in terms of the architectural pathways, and now plotting that on a 2x2. So in order for business executives and decision makers and budget holders to better visualize where investment should go, right? So I suppose if we think about the modernization pathway in terms of architecture treatment that Paul had to walk through, now if we were to take that into a budgetary conversation, it becomes a question of where to invest. And it's actually the same treatment pathways, but instead we take a more financial investment-based approach. So if we look at our 2x2, we have 4 quadrants, and on the horizontal axis is very much the fit with organizational business requirements, and the vertical axis is around the strategic potential or value, right, of the particular application. I think it goes without saying, if an application is highly valuable with high potential and it fits perfectly with business requirement, it would go in the top right quadrant, right? You would then take the pathways of whether serverless containerization, whether you build it new or you re-architect the application towards serverless or containers, right? That's very much an area of investment. Now, for what I also added in this quadrant is also a category in the top left corner called high potential for prototyping to production. So these are for more of the cutting edge technologies such as generative AI, Web3, blockchain, tokenization, where the business requirement might not necessarily be there yet. However, the high potential warrants a level of experimentation, POC, innovation. And in a modern technology landscape, we encourage our developers and our business stakeholders to all experiment with new technologies. So that will also require its own level of investment. Therefore, it goes into the top left corner, and we call that prototype to production because everything we build, there has to be a line of sight towards some form of business value, customer value, that one day it will be deployed into production to benefit the end users or the end customers. Now, for applications, that perfectly fits business requirement. They are good at what they're doing, but they're not that strategic, right? They're somewhat low on the strategic potential axis, but they are very much doing what they're supposed to be doing. So for those applications, we call that stable key operational systems, where they need to be sustained, and in order for them to perform better, as well as to also overcome a lot of the licensing, end of life, technology refresh challenges, we recommend to use the replatform approach, right? Move into containers, move into SaaS-based AWS offerings, whether it's SaaS-based managed databases, managed analytics, where a lot of the operation overhead is eliminated, but not going as far as saying re-architect or refactor, right? Keeping it stable, keeping it operational, because it is key. And my favorite topic is actually retire, because that is often a quadrant that is overlooked. So this is the bottom left quadrant, where you will support the system, not necessarily invest any further. You would not think about replatforming it, and definitely not refactor it, but with a view to sunset it towards retirement. And in large organizations, typically we would see hundreds, if not thousands, of what we would call zombie applications, where the applications themselves are not really being used, they're not decommissioned, they're in a bit of a limbo state, therefore we call them zombie applications. The reason why there are so many zombie applications out there in large organizations is because switching them off actually requires a lot of effort around change management, around dependency mapping. In a large organization, managing multiple stakeholders to figure out who's using what and who's paying for what is actually exercised on its own, but it needs to be done because the benefit is not only around tech debt. Once again, it benefits the process and the people because the funding that gets unlocked from retiring or sunsetting applications or zombie applications can actually circle around into further investment towards modernization, refactor, re-architect, re-platform. So it's actually, this quadrant becomes very much a funding cycle of where the money can flow from savings through re-platform, savings from decommissioning and retiring old application, flow towards the more strategic applications around prototyping and also build new. And that is sort of where we would recommend from an investment perspective, a decision maker look at the overall landscape and make an informed decision on where to invest.
Yeah, that's a really helpful matrix because it just kind of breaks things down and helps you kind of conceptualize where things are going, what's strategic, what's important, what could potentially be used to help fund other more strategic initiatives. And you've also created a modernization roadmap. Is that the next step after looking at this index?
Yeah, so our roadmap is very much a set of principles, right? That summarizes everything we talked about. Our typical approach would be to create a strategy, to build out, and then to operate. However, what I really wanted to highlight in our roadmap approach is that we want organizations to modernize at pace. Now, that is very much a play on words. The fact that unlike migration, where an organization typically might want to take an incremental approach, we believe in the modernization world, you can very much go at pace based on the modernization index, figure out where the investment needs to go, and go full out at scale. Right? You can very much take that one-step approach and modernize straight away. But if you're already in the cloud after post-migration, taking that second step, you should be able to actually do it faster. So the reason why we call it pace is to indicate speed, but it's also to indicate our focus around the 4 pillars of process, architecture, culture, and engineering. As we mentioned, with modern application, we need to have modern processes, right? Modern DevOps that leads to better agility. with architecture, it's very much an evolution architecture, the modular architecture that Paul talked about, around serverless, around having containers, event-driven architecture, the modern paradigms, and it's constantly evolving in a modern landscape. The culture is important, the employee value proposition, the teams, to be able to attract talent to come and work on these modern applications, to upskill, to better use the modern applications, will in turn attract more talent, and it becomes a very sort of flywheel effect for the employees. And lastly, there's engineering. Modern applications have a different paradigm in terms of coding, in terms of observability, in terms of chaos engineering, and reliability engineering. So everything comes together to help an organization modernize at pace.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Ewan. So at this point, we've talked about what modernization is, why it's important, and we've given some really good tips around how to start thinking about it and what kinds of planning might be helpful. Now let's talk about what success looks like. Paul, what do you think success looks like for an organization?
Thanks, Priya. So this is actually a topic that I'm very, very passionate about. And it was recently studied in a McKinsey article, which is called How CIOs Can Accelerate Digital Transformation Through Cloud Platforms. And the table that you're looking at here is a condensation of that article. And what you're looking at here is the typical business outcome based on the type of computing consumption model used. So, for example, on the left-hand side, we have infrastructure as a service, which evolves into platforms as a service, which can be defined as containers. And then finally, there's functions as a service, which is serverless. And depending on your computing need, the outcome changes. So, for example, productivity gained goes from 10% to 40%, and the time to market is quicker. However, the big discovery here, the hero metric, is that for the first time, the change run ratio flips in favor of change, meaning organizations who build modern applications as part of a cloud native strategy can find themselves in the position where 50 to 70% of their resources time is spent creating and evolving as opposed to operating and maintaining. And this is where gains around innovation and product evolution and meeting your customers' and users' needs can be made. And that's where things get very exciting.
Great, thanks, Paul. And Ewan, what are your thoughts on what does good look like?
Yeah, I think what I did was actually I took Paul's model and I overlaid our modernization capability model over it. And it matches perfectly, right? Going very much from that left-hand side of infrastructure problems towards a more optimized and automated state in the cloud, towards that more sort of becoming cloud native on the right-hand side. And as sort of Paul pointed out, the paradigm shift becomes from change to run ratio increases, right? It's very much about developers focusing on making change, benefiting the customer, benefiting the business versus a mundane run task. Similarly, in the target state of a modern organization, the focus shifts away from infrastructure, automation, OpEx, towards sustainability, socioeconomic benefits, and making the right decision and benefiting the broader economy or the broader taxpayer in case of a government organization. So that is very much what good look like. But I think what this model and our journey mapping is also gives a lot of confidence to all organizations out there, because regardless of where you want to start off with, there is a pathway, right? Whether you are at that exploratory stage of looking at the cloud, whether you're already in the cloud, whether you're already becoming somewhat cloud native, there is always a pathway for you to further modernize in order to benefit you and your customers.
Great, that's very helpful. Thanks, Ewan. So I'd like to thank our panelists, Ewan and Paul, and I'd also like to thank our viewers. Thank you for watching our session. We hope you found it to be exciting food for thought, and when you're thinking about what it could mean for your own business and how you could unlock some new value for you. Please reach out to any of us with any questions you might have. We would love to get the conversation started with you directly. And please also complete the survey available via the chat feature in the webinar tool. We would love to hear about any thoughts you had about today's session. There's no better time to transform your business than today. Thank you.